Hi, I'm Gary White for Channel 6 Central Kentucky Television. I'm here with State Senator Jimmy Higdon for a legislative update as we're meeting the session. The 30-day session has just kind of wrapped up last week, correct?
That's correct. We finished up about right before midnight on Thursday night.
Okay.
And so the Constitution says we had to be done. Our 30th day was March the 30th, and we had to be done by midnight. We finished up about 10 minutes deal.
And so we're going to talk a little bit later. There may be some special sessions, or a special session or two, possibly.
You know, the governor's talking about calling a special session, and you know, he's been talking about this for some time now, to do tax reform and pension reform. And tax reform will be to make Kentucky, I guess, to make us more attractive to business and industry, try to expand on our sales tax and cut our personal income tax. He also wants to get rid of, in Kentucky, he wants to get the governor as a priority. He wants to get rid of the inventory tax for business and the inheritance tax. Those are two things that he really wants to get rid of. So, you'll be hearing a lot about, tax modernization as we go forward. Also, we'll be working on pension reform, and the more we know about our pensions, the worse they look, and pensions are a huge issue for the Commonwealth, and we've got to address that because it is really not a very good situation at all. I think I was told not long ago that this past session, we about 28% of our budget went toward Medicaid and pensions, about 28% of our budget. This next budget that we do, as high as 40% of our budget will go to Medicaid and pensions. So it is and really the pensions, Medicaid's been growing at a very fast rate, but pensions, the amount of money that we need to put in our pensions to keep them from faulting is, it's daunting, the amount of money that's, these pensions are underfunded. So we have our work cut out for us, and we'll address that during the special session also.
Okay. All right, so when a special session is announced, or if it is announced,
most likely we'll have that in the fall of the year. I don't. The governor had originally mentioned he'd like to do them in May, but there is too much work to do to have them ready in May. And during the summer, a lot of people that are on vacation and out of town, are just a lot of things going on during the summer. So, and again, we start our interim where all of our committees start meeting again. We start again in June, and I have a feeling that a lot of our conversations will be around these two issues: tax reform and pension reform. And so that'll work out good. We can discuss a lot of this during the summer. Try to get some of this information out to the public so they can look at it and comment. So when we go into session, it will only be there 5 days. Most of the debate will have already been done when we go into session, whenever that is. Like I said, sometime this fall.
Right. But as we said, we just finished the regular session for this year, and there's plenty to discuss from that too.
There is, and probably more than you want to discuss in this interview. But you mentioned the overrides, the
vetoes,
veto overrides. There was 4 of them, and which is kind of historical that a legislature override that many vetoes of a governor's. And I think it shows that legislative independence that we've tried to exercise all through this session, that we've even though the House and the Senate and the governor, all three controlled by Republicans, we still have tried to keep our legislative independence and not the governor. We want people to know the governor doesn't dictate what the General Assembly does, and the House and the Senate have showed that they're independent of each other. Also, there was some things that the House wanted done and the Senate didn't do them, and vice versa. Some things that the Senate wanted done and that the a House wouldn't do. So, you know, a lot of displays of independence there. But Senate Bill 91, which is known as Tim's Law, it provided for a mentally handicapped person or somebody who was, for example, weren't taking their medication as required to keep them where they could function in society. Mm-hmm. And this Tim's Law, after a lot of different steps were taken, I mean, a lot of hoops, you had to jump through a lot of hoops to do this, but a person could be held in a mental institute for up to a year under Senate Bill 91. And that was vetoed by the governor, and it was overridden by the House and the Senate pretty much unanimously. There was very few votes against overriding the governor. And then we had Senate Joint Resolution 57, which was a road naming bill, and the governor vetoed that, and we overrode that veto. House Bill 471, that was a amendment to the budget, and he eliminated one line item in that. There was most people understand there was a huge lawsuit against that it was a nationwide lawsuit against Volkswagen for their misrepresentation of the fuel emissions. So Kentucky received several $1 million through that lawsuit. A lot of that will go back to the people who actually owned a Volkswagen, but I think it's 15-20 million of that will remain with the state of Kentucky. And so House Bill 471 said that that would go back to the general fund, and the legislature would appropriate that wherever it needed to be used. The governor vetoed that because I guess the governor had some ideals how he would use $15 to $20 million, but we overrode that because we're very adamant that the Constitution says that the General Assembly shall appropriate. So any money that's appropriated in the state, and we've had that argument with the Attorney General's office too, that they receive lawsuit money back and they wanted to appropriate and use it like it's, it belongs to them, but it belongs to the taxpayers of Kentucky. And and again, the Constitution says that the General Assembly, that's one of our jobs is appropriate money. So that was, I guess, a argument with the governor pretty much over principle or constitutionality of that. We also overrode House Bill 540, which was a bill that regulated drones within a 5-mile radius of airports. And typically the FAA regulates drones and things near, flight patterns near an airport. But we had some concern by some of our industries, UPS and Amazon, about these drone flights near an airport. So we did do some legislation that made it really tighten up the requirements about operating drones near an airport.
Okay. So there are the 4 veto overrides that were
That's
passed.
correct.
And we were saying, as you were saying, that's unusual for there to be that many veto overrides, particularly in 1 year, but even during a whole tenure, really, right?
It was unusual, but again, we wanted to display that legislative independence, that we're independent from the governor, and now we'll see some more vetoes in the next few days. We left last Thursday, and the governor has 10 days to veto. He has a choice, 3 things he can do. He can sign a bill into law, he can veto it, or he can just simply let it lay on his desk and it becomes law. Right. And there were a few bills that he did that this time, just let them lay on his desk. He didn't really agree with them, but he didn't disagree with them enough to veto them. Right. So he just let them lay on his desk and become law. Now, if he vetoes, if you hear in the news over the next few days that he vetoes some bills, and that veto message will probably come next Friday. He will have all week to study those, and he'll probably veto bills or have that message Friday. We have no opportunity to override those vetoes because we're out of session.
Right.
And we, we've pretty much given up that right by passing those bills late in the session where we didn't have the opportunity to override.
So several bills, however, did pass both the House and the Senate and were signed or laid there, so they did become laws. And let's talk about some of those laws as well, some of those bills, I guess.
Though there's bunches of
Yes.
them. We actually passed 167 bills this session, which is another really record-breaking pace. In the Senate, we try to slow that process down. Myself, I say we have a tendency in Kentucky to overregulate, so we want to try to keep those bills that we pass. And we've been over the last several years, we've kept the number of bills passed to close to 100. It might get up, might be 90, it might be 120, but we try to stay around 100 bills. But with all the new legislators that we had this year and some pent-up demand on legislation, we did pass 167 bills through the House and the Senate. Compare that to 2 years ago during the short session. 2 years ago, we passed 113 bills. So you kind of see the difference. We did pass a lot of legislation. It was a very busy time, and as I told you earlier, it seemed like a regular session because we were there 5 days and we were all 3 weeks, and in those 3 weeks we worked on legislation, and then we've had in the 10-day veto period we had, I think we worked just about every day working on legislation, and so it was a very busy session. A lot of issues, a lot of complicated issues.